My name is Dahlia Attia-King, and I am the founder and CEO of a health tech startup called Panacea. Our mission at Panacea is to increase access to clinical genetic testing so more people can get in control of their health. We do this by simply connecting people directly to labs, genetic counselors, doctors, and an at-home mouth swab that can essentially identify where an individual's specific hereditary risks for disease are. This enables people to use their own genetic data to save their own lives. Pretty simple, right? I mean, it really is simple because people can't access genetic testing, so we bring genetic testing to people. I really wish I could tell you that I just woke up one day with this brilliantly simple idea. But the truth is that this idea was birthed by so much failure and a long winding road that ended very differently than it began. There really was no discernible pattern to the chaos of my journey with Panacea. Many times I thought there couldn't possibly be a simple solution because it would have been obvious. Simple solutions, I thought, don't exist for complex problems. Many times I was one breakdown away from giving up. When I learned that the theme of this creative morning would be simplicity, as a scientist, naturally, I wanted to collect some data. So I began a grand, sophisticated research plan and asked ChatGPT to write my presentation. I'm half kidding, you guys. Along with ChatGPT and other more respectable information gathering sources, I uncovered a really surprising trend about simplicity. Let's review some quotes together about simplicity and see if you guys can spot the same theme. Oops, okay. This is not very simple, actually. Okay. Any intelligent fool can make things bigger, more complex, and more violent. It takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction. Everything is both simpler than we can imagine and more complicated than we can conceive. Making the simple complicated is commonplace. Making the complicated simple, awesomely simple, that's creativity. Simplicity is not the goal. It is the byproduct of a good idea and modest expectations. And finally, my favorite, simplicity does not precede complexity, but follows it. These 5 quotes came from people from all different walks of life, likely very different time periods and very different industries. But all of them seem to have a common philosophy about simplicity. Can anyone spot what that common vein might be? Shout it out. Thank you, Jenny. Yes, simplicity is actually the world's greatest con artist. It turns out arriving at simplicity is not simple at all. Simplicity doesn't occur spontaneously. It doesn't just show up as an obvious thing. And the road to simplicity is often long, winding, complex, and full of failures. Don't I know it? Let's take a look at what ChatGPT said. They were spot on, by the way. The concept of simplicity can be somewhat paradoxical. While the idea of simplicity implies something that is straightforward and easy to understand, achieving simplicity can often be quite complex. Stripping away unnecessary complexities to distill a concept, design, or process down to its fundamental and clear essence can require careful thought, effort, and refinement. Great, so simplicity is a pain in the ass. So before we get there, okay. So have you ever seen a product or heard an idea that was just so painfully simple, you're kind of irritated, you didn't think of it yourself? Every day, right? One of those products for me, a little bit random, but one of those products for me is WD-40. It is grease in a can. That's all it is. In 2022, The WD-40 company had over $500 million in sales. However, the name WD-40 tells a very different story. WD-40 stands for water displacement, which is likely the lubricant, formula number 40. Legend has it that it took the scientists 2 years and 39 failed formulas to get our favorite squeaky door juice just right. James Dyson, the founder of the Dyson vacuum, which, side note, is the greatest home product. Who has a Dyson? Tell me you wouldn't trade like your spouse for the Dyson. It's an incredible, incredible product. And anyone that knows me is like, she's talking about the Dyson again. Can you even imagine? It's my favorite product ever. Anyhow, James Dyson, the founder of the Dyson vacuum, had over 5,000 failed prototypes. In fact, his idea was rejected by every major vacuum manufacturer in the world. But he believed so much in what he was creating that he created his own factory to build his innovative bagless vacuum. And last year, the Dyson company made $7.3 billion in revenue. It is the lion's shareholder of the vacuum market, not only in this country, but beyond. I can only dream that my journey with Panacea ends like James Dyson, but I can tell you for certain that my story actually started off a lot like his. I've always loved science and biology. It really fascinated me and kind of made sense to my analytical brain. Although there were moments, and mom and dad can attest, a lot of people thought I wouldn't even graduate high school. And other moments where I thought I might be a whale trainer at SeaWorld. Or a mechanic, I loved cars. Or, don't judge me, a military sniper. But medicine was just always in the background. So I was on the pre-med track at the University of Miami, studying biology and chemistry, when I caught mono. Every college kid catches mono. But for some strange reason, I could not build immunity to it. And the virus bombarded my body for over 3 years. I had a very rare case of chronic Epstein-Barr. That's the virus that causes mono. And it was nearly debilitating. I remember having to literally crawl on all fours to the bathroom just because I couldn't stand up straight and walk. But it didn't really end there, because as the virus faded, I became a type 1 diabetic. Needless to say, it took me 9 long years to graduate college, but I graduated on the pre-med track just as I had planned. Medical school was next, and although my grades were not even remotely impressive, and I was nearly a decade older than most applicants, I still wanted to give it a shot. Little did I know that an obscure opportunity that presented itself would change the trajectory of my entire life. A small group of genetic laboratories needed a salesperson to sell genetic testing to doctors. Easy, or so I thought. This job could help me occupy my time as I figured out my applications to medical school. After about 90 days, I made $0, but I learned 2 important things. Number 1, I was a shitty salesperson. And number 2, doctors were completely unprepared to utilize genetic testing because it was essentially a new product that they could barely keep up with. Today, studies are showing that 80% of people are not able to get a genetic test because their doctors either won't prescribe it or because their insurance company won't cover it. These are people whose lives could be saved with a simple test, and they just couldn't get it. I was honestly really worried because this world-changing technology existed, and yet very few people were benefiting from it. For the first time in my life, I wondered if becoming a doctor was really the right path for me. I couldn't get past the thought that there was a massive problem in the genetic space that doctors, to no fault of their own, couldn't fix. But could I fix this problem? For months, I toiled and cried over not knowing my next steps. And finally, I asked myself one defining question. If I were a successful doctor or a successful entrepreneur trying to fix these genetic test problems, which path would allow me to touch more lives? My struggle to choose a path stemmed from the belief that few other professions are as noble as being a doctor. The dedication and fight to save lives inspired me like no other. And I look at my dad because my dad's a doctor. How could I do anything else? And then the light bulb. I realized I wouldn't be doing anything else. In fact, I could be saving lives on an exponential scale if I could solve the genetic testing problem. It was simple math, and my path was chosen. Unfortunately, the next 9 years were filled with more failure than the 9 that preceded it. Boy, is our healthcare system complicated. I've spent more than 10,000 hours independently and with the Panacea team trying to unravel the quagmire that is hindering access to genetic testing. In hopes of anyone here that might be on their own road to simplicity, here is a slightly oversimplified, retrospective view on our road to simplicity. We started off by asking ourselves just 4 core questions. 1, what really matters? 2, what is hindering those things that matter? 3, are these hindrances changeable? And 4, if so, can we create leverage to change these hindrances? The only thing that mattered from the very inception of this idea was that more people get their hands on genetic testing to save lives. Every single thing we did centered around this one thing. When we started to explore the space and try to identify what these actual barriers were, what was stopping people from getting genetic testing, we realized they were 5 key decision makers, 5 stakeholders: insurance companies, doctors, labs, genetic counselors, and patients themselves. Unfortunately, insurance companies in this country are the final decision maker on our healthcare. And for them, testing is actually, counterintuitively, a poor investment. We can talk about that a little later because it's kind of complicated, not simple. Doctors, as we already know, unfortunately, lack the awareness on testing. It's just too new. Labs and genetic counselors both get paid by insurance companies, and their payments are inconsistent and patchy at best. Finally, patients don't always even know about genetic testing. And even if they do know about genetic testing, they don't always know where to get it or how it will help them in particular. Then we started to think about if these hindrances, are changeable. For insurance companies, it's a hard no. There is nothing in the world that I can say, or anyone else can say for that matter, that is going to convince an insurance company to fund a test that either doesn't make them money or doesn't save them money. So we had to remove them from the equation completely. Doctors are going to be a tough one also. It's going to be almost impossible for Panacea to educate the 1 million+ physicians in this country. But we suspected we were going to be able to find at least a small group of doctors who did understand genetics. Again, the labs and genetic counselors have an insurance problem that we're not going to be able to fix. But we thought maybe there was a new way for them to make money. And patients, of course, educating and informing them was not going to be easy, but if we could do it and we could tell people how they could save their own lives with genetic testing, we might have won half the battle. Finally, can we as a company create leverage to change these hindrances? In other words, can Panacea somehow address the pain points of all of these different stakeholders in a way that makes us money? As suspected, we did find a few doctors that did know how to apply genetics in the care of their patients. And after meeting with multiple labs and genetic counselors, we learned that they were not only open to a new source of revenue, they were dreaming of a new source of revenue. Finally, the patients, the jewel of the stakeholder crown, has the most to lose and the most to gain from solving the genetic testing access problem. Luckily for us, the magical piece is that when we surveyed 100 people, 80% of women and 70% of men are willing to pay out of pocket for genetic testing services that their insurance company didn't cover. The patient, you and I, are the victims and saviors of this problem. The puzzle pieces finally started to come together. We knew we had doctors, labs, and genetic counselors all providing a life-saving service. We also knew we had patients who were willing to pay out of pocket for these exact services. But today, the right doctors, labs, genetic counselors, and patients are all completely disconnected. And there was no easy way for them to find each other. Enter Panacea. A simple solution was born. Panacea would become the Uber of clinical genetic testing. It was so simple. We didn't invent anything. We simply united vital stakeholders that didn't exist together in this way. We peeled back the layers one by one, and lo and behold, a simple solution was found. We have been conditioned to believe that simplicity is void of difficulty, and that simplicity is the absence of complexity, when in fact, simplicity is just unraveled complexity. It's transformed complexity. Nothing more, nothing less. We all want simplicity, but do not feel defeated if your road to simplicity is complex. Apparently, it's supposed to be. Thank you.